Well, welcome back to another episode of Rock M Reacts, fresh off of a tough, hard-fought defeat at the hands of the Georgia Bulldogs, 30-21. Tigers looked to be kind of down and out multiple points throughout this game, but fought back. Brady Cook, Luther Burden, offensive stars, defensive stars as well, etc., kind of making key plays to keep them in the game. But in the end, Georgia seemed to kind of wear down the defense. The environment seemed to get to the offense late. Cook made a couple uncharacteristic mistakes late in this game, and the Tigers fall to 7-2. Now 2 games back from Georgia in the SEC East, with a couple big games coming up down the stretch. But just in kind of reacting to the game, I was not there in person, but our own Aden Rao was there in Athens for the game. So just kind of go into kind of what the environment, the game day environment was like, the Mizzou presence, and just kind of what Sanford was like during the game. And then also just how you think the Tigers kind of handled the environment throughout the game with the noise and kind of how the momentum swung.
Yeah, so from what I really saw, there wasn't many Mizzou fans there. Obviously, I wrote a piece that was out right after the game about the game day environment. It took me about 30 minutes before the game walking around Athens to find a Missouri fan. Actually, it happened to be Tyron Hopper's uncle, and it was a really cool environment. I have to say, it was loud. It was hitting 120 decibels at some points, and as to how Mizzou handled that environment, there were a couple times some snaps were snapped without Brady Cook's knowledge. He wasn't ready for him. There was an incredible play on that last drive where he threw an interception that he wasn't even ready for the snap, but the ball just held there right on his stomach, and he still got a pass off the Theo Weiss for a first down. There was a few delay of game penalties, a few false start penalties, something you'd expect from a ruckus atmosphere like this. But to say that their handling of the atmosphere is perfect wouldn't be the case. But would I say it's bad? I also wouldn't say that. I would say they kind of, did it in a mediocre way, I'd say, of handling an atmosphere like this.
But yeah, I agree with you in the sense that, Mizzou was a little bit overwhelmed at times throughout this game. At times they seemed kind of like they belonged right in the field with Georgia. At times it seemed like the moment was a little bit too big for them. And it seemed like it did really get to them down the stretch. I mean, Sanford is one of the greatest environments in the sport, 90,000 plus strong. And that fan base was ready for, really itching for a game like this season. And we saw kind of how that home field advantage paid off. They've obviously won. I forget the exact number, how many home games in a row, but it's among the longest all time, I believe at least top 5. So a tough kind of environment to walk into and come out with a win. I think overall they handled it well. And I think as you said, a lot of those mistakes were to be expected with the team that hadn't necessarily Kroger Field, yes, was sold out, but it was 61,000 and it was half empty by the time the fourth quarter rolled around. Sanford was a little bit different tonight. But just looking at how the game went, you obviously saw early on explosive pass Luther Burden gets things started. The Missouri offense is, firing on all cylinders. Carson Beck responds. Teams go back and forth a little bit in the first quarter. Then you hit a lull in the second. Third quarter comes around, and that's when things really got interesting in this game. And Georgia seemed to really claim momentum for a little bit and kind of take control of the game. Carson Beck and that offense was really in a rhythm. Brady Cook and co. kind of took a step back for a bit. But then Mizzou, when they were down and out by 2 scores, fought back, got a clutch score to put themselves right back in it. And then fourth quarter rolls around, and Mizzou with a couple of chances to still kind of either reclaim the lead or get back in the game. Can't take advantage of it, whether it be turnovers, mistakes, not being able to get stops on third downs on defense. So just kind of what you see from how Mizzou progressed throughout the game, fighting back multiple times, but was it maybe a case of just having to expend too much energy to stay in the game and not being able to close the deal late?
Yeah, I would say that. I'd say the pivotal moment was definitely the first interception from Cook. I mean, you were driving on the field, you're at midfield, touchdown gets you the lead. They were on their heels, and then that kind of play was, kind of really just gifted to them there with the throw. I mean, I from what I saw, I really don't know what he saw. I don't know why he really threw that ball in that direction at all. And that seems to be sometimes, in high pressure moments, it can happen to Brady. Namely the LSU game. He made, some boneheaded plays late as well there. As far as what went wrong. They started off the game with a great drive. And I feel like, some of that downfield looking for Burden one-on-one, I think they lost that over the course of the game there. I think the wide receiver matchup with the corners, I think they had the advantage there, and they should have really exploited that more. Would have liked to see it, but then again, obviously, this is the best defense they've played all season. It's one of the best defenses in the country, so really can't ask for much more than that. The defense as well was fantastic. They really put out a great performance. Holding the Bulldogs to field goals on plenty of occasions, so can't really fault them there either.
Well, and yeah, and just kind of going off of that, another big thing kind of coming into this game that was a major key was how Mizzou would be able to match up with Georgia in the trenches. Georgia's offensive line only allowed 6 sacks up to this point in the season, kind of regarded as one of the best in the nation coming into this one. But Mizzou's defensive line had been creating a lot of havoc, especially as of late, as Darius Robinson and some of those other transfers had really settled in at defensive end. Flip side, Mizzou's offensive line was one of the most improved in the country, but it hadn't faced someone like the Georgia front seven as of yet. Just how did they held up? Mizzou outgained Georgia on the ground by, I believe, 20 or 30 yards, something along those lines. Cody Schrader averaged, I believe it was 4.4 yards, or no, 5.1 yards per carry, and the team as a whole was 4.4. So outgaining Georgia on the ground, a team that generally relies on its ground game at least to get the offense going. Fairly impressive. Also recorded 3 sacks against the Georgia offensive line, which was half of what they had allowed up all season long. So how much of an impact do you think that made on Mizzou being able to stay in this game and hang around? And just kind of how impressed were you with Mizzou being able to hang with a team that one could argue is the best in the country in terms of in the trenches play on both sides of the ball?
No, I think it was insanely impressive. I think that, I was at the post-game presser with Kirby just now, and he was talking about how Darius Robinson is one of the hardest guys to block in the country. And to say that about a guy like Darius Robinson, who, obviously stepped up into a huge role at the edge rusher position this season, a position that was in question prior to the season beginning. And he's really answered that question and more. I mean, tonight he was everywhere. You're constantly winning his pass rush reps. I mean, he's analytically been one of our best players this season, and for good reason. I think, him being able to, win first down for the Tigers. Kirby said after the game that he believed that the Tigers had won first down on defense more often than the Bulldogs did. And that was the case. And it was more so just like, some big opportunistic plays on second and third down that really didn't go the way of the Tigers. And, it's a shame that, the performance wasn't really met with, at the same amount of offensive prowess. But then again, you can't really fault it there because of how good the Georgia, team overall is, just talent-wise.
Kind of the last point I kind of wanted to get into just about this game in general is how Missouri's offense coming in against the Georgia defense that obviously among the best in the country these past couple of years. Again, this season, despite not being maybe at the same level, still an elite unit that across the board was among the best in the country at every position. You especially look at that secondary, which coming into this game, everybody was looking at how was Missouri's wide receiver core going to be able to match up with them. Saw Burton get an advantage early on, but he only had 10 receiving yards after that, in large part due to injury, of course. But you saw Theo Weiss really step up. Brady Cook throwing a lot of back shoulder balls today to Weiss and Mekhi Miller too as well. So just Mizzou's offense, Kirby Moore, how he called this game as well. Just how do you think that unit fared against Georgia's defense and adjustments throughout the game and kind of that matchup of a chess matchup, Kirby Moore versus Kirby Smart?
Yeah, I think they fared very well. I think that the wide receiver corner matchup, Mizzou had the advantage on coming into this game. I think they could have really done a better job of exploiting that, actually. You saw late in the game when it was, desperation, Weiss was consistently beating his man on those, back shoulder throws. I mean, he's one of the best. I mean, he's a super talented on those kind of plays. So, I would have liked to see them exploit that more, try and find more one-on-ones. But, with the way the running game was going, you had to keep feeding the rock there. I really do think that some of the drives just needed to be extended longer. Those big third down plays, they didn't really make those plays when they needed to as much as Georgia did. Georgia, it's so weird. Like, this is the first time the offense hasn't, scored more than 30 points since the, Middle Tennessee game. But I don't feel they played that bad. They really did get the yardage. They just couldn't punch it in.
Yeah, that was one of kind of my main takeaways from this game was you weren't going to win this game kicking field goals, and while kicking only 2 isn't the worst thing in the world, to take down the number 2 team in the country on the road, you have to convert those, at least one of those 2 into touchdowns. Certainly some missed opportunities there. a missed opportunity in general in Athens, but still a valiant performance, something that I don't think any Mizzou fan or player coach should be hanging their hat on or hanging their head about. But that being said, you now move forward, 3 games left on the schedule. First place in the SEC is more than likely, at least out of the, well, actually, mathematically, Georgia only has 2 SEC games left. But in looking ahead, you got Tennessee, Florida, Arkansas. Tennessee looking like probably the other strongest contender in the East. That could be a de facto second place game in the SEC. So then you got Florida down the line, who just took a tough loss to that Arkansas team you're also going to play. So it's going to be an interesting stretch coming up. In looking ahead, just does today kind of change? How much does today's performance change your perspective of this team? And how do you see them faring next week against a Tennessee team that's going to come in with an explosive offense, has dropped 128 points in the past 2 meetings with Mizzou, and has so many weapons all over the field that are going to be very similar to Georgia in the fact that they can beat you in so many different ways?
Yeah, I mean, after the game, Elia, Coach Drink, he really talked about, not hanging your hat on moral victories, but in a world where the college football playoff looks at margin of victory very closely, you have to admit that, this kind of game will show the whole country that Mizzou is not just some team that's 7-1 with a couple wins, good wins. They're actually a team that is, really talented, here to play, and can be a New Year's Six contender, I believe. I strongly believe that if they can win this game against Tennessee, and especially win out, which, I really do think if they can get over that hurdle in Tennessee, they can do that. As far as, it doesn't really change my perspective on this team. It might change a lot of other people's perspective on this team that weren't really looking at it closely. I've always thought this team was special since I got to see that offensive performance against K-State. Like, it was just a complete flip from what I had been used to be seeing from this team. Offensively, this team is very good. I think I really don't think that I really do think that this result tonight, while it is disappointing, while it does take us out of the race from the SEC East, I think it should really change the public's perception of this Mizzou team and, how they have performed this whole season and if they are for real or not. I think that they are for real.
I think certainly I agree with you. I think it's more of a sense of, you look statistically, you look, by just watching the game. And I don't think there was any area where you look at and say, wow, Georgia outplayed Missouri by miles. It was a game in which they were toe-to-toe with them in most statistical categories. And on the field, they looked like they belonged with them. In the end, I think it was Georgia's, kind of that championship pedigree and experience of being in games like this over the past 2-3 years that really helped them. Because when that late in the third, fourth quarter came around, they seemed a lot more comfortable, and that they also had the home crowd at their back, of course, but they seemed a lot more comfortable, whereas Mizzou looked to be pressing a little bit more. That was more than likely a difference at the end of the day, but that's also just a part of the maturation of a building program, which Drink would still, while they have achieved to get higher up that mountaintop this year, they're not at the top of it yet. They are not there yet, but it looks like it is coming soon based on how everything is coming together. But that'll wrap up another episode of Rock and Reacts for Parker Gillam from Columbia and Aden down in Athens as our boots on the ground. We'll see y'all next week. I believe Aden will be back in coverage for the Tennessee game as well, which should be a fun one. Game time will probably be announced sometime tomorrow, but potentially Georgia's going to get that CBS slot after winning this game. So more than likely a night game in prime time at Fairfield Field next week, which who can ever complain about that? So we will see you all next week, and be sure to show out the rest of the season despite these losses, because this team is still was fun to watch today and still will continue to be fun to watch.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, just click the subscribe button below. Bing. And you can find this podcast through the Apple Podcast app or for iPhone, or the Google Podcast app for Android, or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. We are also available on Spotify. Just search for Rock M Radio. And if you like other sports, Fans First Sports Network is a podcast network that has coverage of all other teams, Major League Baseball, MLS, NFL, whatever you want to listen and read about. It is a great network full of really fantastic podcasts. So look them up and subscribe to any and all of those podcasts. Rock M Radio will be back with more episodes coming soon. Thanks.